Hi everyone, welcome to Hunter Gatherer Cooking. We're doing another video at the Stalking Show 2024, and I'm joined by Hugh from BDS, who is going to chat to me about all things BDS, basically. So,
looking forward to it.
So let's start with what do you do for BDS, and then perhaps we'll talk about what BDS do for people who don't know. That's probably the easiest thing.
So I am chairman of the Board of Trustees for the British Deer Society. Have been now for 3 years, going into my fourth year, and have been on the board for about 6 years prior to that as a trustee director.
Is it classed as a charity?
It is a charity.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I said someone else was a charity earlier, and they were most certainly not a charity.
Okay. No, we are very much a charity.
Yeah. But you get involved with so much, though, don't you? That's why I'm struggling with where to sort of
where to pigeonhole us.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So ostensibly, what our sort of principle of the British Deer Society is we are a welfare charity. So it's all about, which may sound like a bit of an oxymoron given what we also train people to do, but we are all about deer and the welfare of deer.
Yes.
And that's what we were set up to do. And in our 60th anniversaries, we've been going for over 60 years now.
Yeah.
What we're not, which I think people sometimes forget, we're not a shooting organisation.
Right.
You know,
I didn't think that, so that's good.
Okay, good. So unlike other organisations, but you know, where do most people come into contact, or have they traditionally to date come into contact with the British Deer Society? You know, we've got a membership of about 5,500, but most of our members would be people who manage deer in some capacity or other.
Yeah.
Not many of our members would be non-stalkers. Not many of them. And we, as we sit here today, where do we see ourselves going forward? Because I think we've got such an important role to play now, given where deer and how deer are being portrayed.
Well, it's changing.
Right, it's changing dramatically.
Yeah, massively.
And I think it falls on us, particularly as a non-shooting organisation, to make sure that when governments are talking about deer and anything to do with deer, that we can sit there and be the voice of reason to ensure that they are being portrayed in the correct way.
Yeah.
And that there is real evidence, because I think too often now there's very little scientific evidence. People talk about, we've got too many deer. Well, that's quite a big sweeping statement. Oh, there's 2 million deer in the UK. Are there? Yeah. I mean, does anyone know how many deer there are?
I've heard I've heard people talking, and I've heard numbers being made up and exaggerated and underestimated, and the conclusion that I draw is, well, the numbers aren't right.
No one knows.
So no one knows.
No. And so one of the things that we are now trying to do is bring a lot more science and evidence behind it. So our plan is to do and fund thermal drone surveys across the UK, and to really start being able to then extrapolate real information, up-to-date information, to start building a proper profile of this species population in different parts of the countryside.
Yeah.
Because as we all know, if you're going to manage deer correctly, the founding principle is, well, you've got to know how many deer are on your ground.
Yeah.
And if we're looking across a landscape, how many across a landscape? But then coming back to what we do as the British Deer Society in terms of training people, it's about training people to manage deer to the highest welfare standards.
Yeah.
And it is one of the things that the government is talking about doing, although we still await for the English deer management strategy to be released. It's been meant to have been released now for months and months and months, and it hasn't done. And I think one of the things they're talking about is night shooting. Well, from a welfare perspective, should people just be able to go, oh great, we can go night shoot? go and buy a night sight, thermal sight, and go out and shoot deer at night. I don't think they should.
Yeah.
But if they're trained properly to do it, then there's no reason why they can't. That's another tool in terms of managing deer populations. But I think what is critical, if we are going to manage deer correctly in this country, is the venison supply chain and building out a proper, sustainable venison consumption across the country, because it's insane in this day and age that we are not eating more of this incredible meat.
Completely agree.
We all talk about it,
And that's what I'm trying to do. Not intentionally, but I want to promote it. I think it's fantastic food.
well, so we all know the benefits, but why are more people not eating it? Is it because
Where do you start? Supermarkets, schools, education.
Exactly, and those are all the bits that
Yeah.
we are going to be looking to try and fill the holes in.
And that's why I struggled when you asked me, like, what do you do? It's like, I feel like, because I know that you're involved in so much, because you obviously, I suppose in a way, report into the government with data and figures.
Well, we
and
don't
things like
report
that.
into them, but what we will do is make absolutely sure that if we think that any organisation is taking any statistics or information about deer that we think is either unknown or incorrect,
Yeah.
one of our jobs is to make sure that we can furnish them with the right information.
Yeah.
And that's why, when I get asked, well, why should people, what's in it for me if I join the BDS? It's like, it's not what it's in it for you, it's about what you love doing, which is being out in the countryside, and if you love being involved with deer in whatever capacity.
And I've heard this not argument. I've heard this talked about a lot. Is which membership do you join? Where does the money get spent? And I suppose to a degree, what matters most to them really, because you also in terms of what's in it for them, you will support stalkers, won't you? In terms of advice and guidance.
Well, yes, up to a point. I don't. We are not in a position if there's legal guidance needed. We're not a big charity.
Yeah.
We are a small charity. Now we're looking to get a lot bigger, but that can only happen by growing our membership, and that can also only happen by people understanding why they want to join us. What can we offer them, but what can we also offer what they love doing?
Yeah.
The wider picture of what they love doing, and I think these are all. Elements that we need to be able to address and show why we are a vibrant organisation that is going to support deer in this country in the best possible way. And that involves that means yes, we've got to manage deer, but that means if you're going to manage deer, you're managing them to the highest possible standards, which therefore means that when you're putting venison into this food chain, it's being done to the highest possible standards.
Yeah.
And it's where can we as the BDS do more is one of those areas that we can look at is how do we get more people who aren't involved in the countryside in any element but eat food and want to eat good, healthy, sustainable food, understanding that you can buy venison, where can we buy it from, and helping in that process, because that's the only way we're going to be able to increase the national cull, because we all know the challenges as currently are with the small number of AGHEs we have in this country, there's no way they could take an increase in deer cull.
Yeah.
So that's not going to happen unless we can create that market locally. But I think that also requires some sensible thinking around A, the price you pay people who are on the ground doing the work, but B, what is the right price that you should be selling venison at? Because the problem is, I know what I get paid when I take it into a game dealer, but I know what price I'm being asked to pay if I'm going into the butcher's to buy it.
Yeah.
And
There's a big difference.
There's a huge difference.
And also mentality. Like a lot of people, they think that it's a Christmas food.
And it shouldn't be.
One, it's only available then, and two, that's the only time you eat it then.
I went to a butcher's in February, late February, and I just said, and I was in there, and I just said, this is a butcher's in the Cotswolds, and I was just like, hey, you haven't got any venison? He said, well, we've got sort of venison pies. I'm like, yeah, but what about the rest of it? He said, well, it's out of season. I went, no, it's not. He went, well, sorry, by that I mean it's out of season in terms of when people want to buy it. And I said, why? But again, even then, you know that it's going to be expensive, and that there's no logic to that.
I think there's a lot of foodies out there, there's loads of foodies, who when they see something like that, they're like, oh yeah, Yeah, let's have a bit of that. But then there's all these myths about it's dry, it's gamey, it's this, and then all those myths need to be like busted open.
Totally, and people also, unfortunately, with the whole ease of people wanting easy food, they've become totally disconnected from actually real food, and how you make it, how you cook it,
because it arrives in a packet.
Yes, and so they find this slightly, and I think it therefore falls on us to, we've got to go some way to presenting it, which is why we've got to produce the highest possible standards.
Yeah.
When we put that venison into the food chain, and none of us, and I think that's why we've got to support any initiative that will help do that.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important that we also need, we need supermarkets. This is one of the things I've been saying to government. We need supermarkets to sit there and say, look, wild venison, you should all be eating this, and by the way, this is the price point.
Yeah.
It's not the price point you think it is. This is a great price point. And teach people.
Yeah. My understanding is that they are only giving game dealers so much shelf space at the moment, and there could be more shelf space, but for whatever reason.
But I think, I don't know what the reasons would be for that, but I also think, if you live in the countryside, how many people who live in the countryside know that, actually you probably could go and walk, if there's a local farm shoot or a local shoot somewhere, if you went and knocked on the door and said, look, over Christmas, over from October through to January, any chance I could have a couple of brace of pheasants every week?
Yeah.
They'd give them, they'd probably give them to you.
Yeah.
All you'd have to learn to do is pluck it and draw it, which is one of the things that I think we should be doing, is teaching people, putting them back in touch with
that
food
skill
production.
doesn't exist. I'm doing something with Queen's College Taunton.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever dealt with them
No.
at all. A chap called Joe Mann. They won the Champion of Champions at the Eat Game Awards.
Yeah.
But I loved what he was talking about, because they're teaching the kids about butchering and plucking and cooking with it and things like that.
Removing the fear factor.
Education is just the way forward.
Honestly, I look at, I've got young kids, they're not quite as young now, they're all growing up, hitting their teens. But, when they were younger and their mates used to come round, if I was in my larder, garlic-king or butchering, they're not, everyone thinks, oh, you've got to protect the children. No.
No,
The
they're
opposite.
inquisitive.
They're fascinated by it. Genuinely fascinated by it. Show it to them later on in life, and they're more likely to become squeamish about it.
They've been conditioned.
Exactly.
They've been conditioned at that point.
So, and you're right. Should it not be part of the curriculum? Actually understanding.
Well, again, I don't want to talk about education, and it was a long time ago, but food technology, or not cooking, as I always said. You just cook a shepherd's pie, or you cook a lasagna, and that's
Great.
okay.
Yes.
But it's not a connection to food or the food chain, or
none of that. And interestingly, if you so it's like, well, okay, but what have you taught them about where's that mince come from?
provenance?
What
They should be talking
part
about
of the
that.
animals that come from? And it's understanding that, and that's where, and I think that's where.
It's because we're programmed. We can only eat chicken, beef, pork, and sheep.
Yes.
Anything other than that
Yes.
is
Well,
either a taboo or
And let's be honest, it's mainly chicken and beef.
yeah.
So, and I think that's why it's brilliant. We start seeing, like organisations like what you guys are doing. It's fantastic because it's just getting more people talking about it. And interesting, I was talking to a lady whose business is all about wild meats, and she's seeing more and more vegetarians
Right.
coming through saying,
Yes.
okay, I want to
Yeah.
eat wild meat. Interestingly, I want it shot lead-free.
Yeah.
Got to be lead-free. But there is a demand, so if you've got vegetarians asking for it, surely we've got a big open goal. We've just got to get to set it up right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those, and I think those are all areas which we will be getting much more involved in.
So what's the situation? I hope I phrased this right. What is so what I wanted to talk about was like the courses and things like that.
Yeah.
That BDS is the word run or is the word organise? I'm not quite
So
sure.
we run
Yeah,
courses.
yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about those? Because obviously you're talking about regulation and education and things like that. That is a massive part of accreditation, isn't it? Which I would assume that the industry will just naturally get stricter and stricter on.
Yeah,
So that if it goes into the food chain, you have to have your documents, basically.
Yes, you do, and so we run DSC1, DSC2. You used to get your trained hunter status with DSC1. You don't now unless you do the game meat hygiene add-on part, or you now get it with DSC2. But
because I've got my DSC1 booked in.
You've got it booked in.
Yeah,
Good.
absolutely.
Excellent.
I need to move it, unfortunately.
With who? By the way, there is only one right answer to this.
I'm sorry, I meant with you.
Oh, good.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
you.
Sorry,
No,
I wouldn't have said it. I wouldn't have said it otherwise. I need to move it because I can't make the date now.
Yeah.
But I'm thoroughly looking forward to it.
Okay, excellent.
I booked it when I really knew next to nothing. But I feel more confident about going into it because I can relate to. I'm one of those where I need to relate to it.
Yes.
To learn.
And it will be a great entry point to keep. You do that course.
It's a 3-day course, isn't it? Yeah.
And it gives you the foundations to then go forward and do more stalking.
Yeah.
That you've got the basics covered.
Yeah.
And you are, most importantly, that you are confident and safe handling a rifle.
You have something at the end of it to say you know something about what you're doing.
Yes, yeah.
You have a level of knowledge.
Exactly.
Really interesting, I was talking to Norman Mulvaney from Irish Safari.
Right.
And he was talking about effectively the accreditation, if you want to go over to Ireland and do it, what you need. And if I've got it right, I want to listen back to it and watch it back, but you need to have DSC1 or an equivalent to actually get your license to go over there and shoot.
And
so if you don't have it,
you can't.
I think I asked. I said, well, so if I went over without that, can I shoot? Can I touch the rifle? And I'm pretty sure he said no. But that seems to fit more in line, from what I understand, of the more European.
Very much so.
Regulations.
Yes.
Let's call
God.
it.
I mean, you go to Germany.
So in a way, I feel Britain is not as regulated.
No.
Even though it was so, I won't say difficult to get my license, because I went through the hurdles.
But it's rigorous.
But if that was hard, when we went to Germany, I was under the impression that from them how much training they have to put in to get whatever their qualifications are.
It's a 1 year. It's 1 year of studying.
Yeah.
And it's like a degree in and of itself. And I think, I see lots of merits in that. But I don't think in this country, if that was going to be suddenly brought in, something as rigorous as that, I think that would be very difficult to do. But, the challenge is, should someone who's never picked up a firearm before be able to just go out and shoot an animal? Personally, I don't think they should, but it happens, and there's loads of people who've done that. And, should you not learn a little bit about it? Should you not have had to pass some sort of proficiency? And I do think in this day and age we're going to see, there was talk that there was going to be legislation brought in around firearm certificates, that if you were going to have a firearm to shoot deer, you were going to have DSC1. Now, I think I don't think that is, we wait and see, but I don't think that's going any further. But that was one of the things that was being mooted.
Right.
But, it's as a welfare organisation, which is what we are, it's very hard to argue against the fact that, if someone's going to go out and take the life of an animal, there's got to be some basic embedded welfare, training, proficiency, safety. So it sounds completely reasonable, but then you've got the challenge of people who've not got DSC1 but have maybe managed to live for 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So but you're always going to have that. But I do think that a direction of travel should be, particularly if we're coming back to the point about what we're trying to do is embed training to produce high quality produce, then it can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. What's coming up for BDS? What's sort of on the agenda at the moment?
So we've recently just launched our new 6-year strategy, Together for Deer. Very ambitious, and it's not going to be easy, but what I'm really excited about is we've got a team at headquarters who have all worked their socks off to put this plan together. They've all fed into it, and I think you're going to see a much higher profile of the British Deer Society going forward, which is great.
A bit of a push then.
Well, it's a push, but I think it's not a push about just a push for the sake of being a push to get. Yes, I would love to see more people joining us because they actually see what we're doing and what we're about, and that's part of what we need to be doing, much more vocal. But on a much broader spectrum, it's about also educating people who have nothing to do with deer management but love the countryside.
Yeah, absolutely.
About deer.
Well, that's the
very
mass
important.
market, really, isn't it?
It's
That's
really
the
important.
consumer.
Now, and whether they join or not, but it's about helping them understand the role deer play in our landscape.
Yeah.
And we've got a big part to play in that.
Yeah.
And we're going to be bringing a lot more training up because I think there is a demand for it. People want to be able to improve continuously, and so if we can bring the right, not courses for courses' sakes, but the right kind of training out, and embracing learning from home, so you don't necessarily have to be sat in the classroom for 3 days.
I mean, that's a massive thing. When you get sent through the material, it's really daunting.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
there's
then-
a lot of information in there, though.
But it's also knowing about, well, okay, so you're doing it. Who can you ring? I'm sure you know lots of people.
Luckily,
But
I do.
But if
yeah.
you're someone who had an interest in it, but you didn't know anyone, it's like, well, where do I start? Well, that's where we have branches all around the country.
Yeah.
We break the regions up into branches as a British Deer Society. If someone has joined the BDS and is doing DSC1, it's what I'd love to see is that they know they can ring up and can they find a mentor? Yes.
Yeah.
Someone who you can ring up, ask a
And
question.
that's the good thing
send
about
an
the
email
community, is there is a
Yes.
real community for things like that.
And I think that's what I hope we will start to see break now. Because deer stalkers traditionally are always seen as quite insular. They
Yeah.
look on their patch.
But
and
they are very protective,
very
about
protective.
what they've got.
And I get it. There's lots of reasons for that.
Yeah.
But what I would love to see is that, like all these things, we've got to get younger people involved.
100%.
And the only way, the opportunities for younger
People like
to-
Rian, who we met
Yes,
before,
exactly. And the opportunities for younger people to get involved are difficult.
and ladies,
Definitely.
more and more getting involved. So
Which is fantastic, and
it's all on the uplift.
Great to see that, and I'd love to see a lot more of that. Is what
Yeah.
I'd love to see. So, and I hope if we can, as the British Deer Society, can enable younger people to get more involved with any aspects of working with deer and the countryside, that can only be a good thing.
It's like a to-do list that never ends, though.
It's a
isn't
very
it?
long to-do list.
Right, we are running out of time,
Okay.
so thank you very much for coming on.
Well,
it's been a
thank you
hell
very
of a
much for having
day.
me. Oh, it's been a long day. I may just stay awake for this.
No.
Oh,
Well,
good.
God, I'm not going anywhere yet. If you do have any questions at all, either for myself or Hugh, just generally pop them in the description. Pop them in the comments below. I'll put the BDS link into the description, so that'll take you straight through to the website and things like that. But I've really enjoyed this, and hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and we'll see you soon for the next one.